Stephanie, and to the Rosie Network. Always appreciate opportunities to give back to the Rosie Network community, and very grateful for Robinhood putting this together. Because when it comes to the topic of retirement, whether you're in business or considering business or well out of transition after the military, we I've done talks like these and kind of found that the veteran military community, they're always in a different phase. And so I wanted to hit on some topics today that maybe kind of get left out when we're thinking about retirement planning, and then also tie it in a little bit more to the big picture of what's going on in the world today, and just the realities of what retirement planning means for, regardless of what kind of career you're in, or what stage of retirement you're in. Some of the stuff that isn't just something you can just go and Google and find, or watch some good YouTube videos about, because there's definitely a lot of good information out there on this. So wanted to share from my perspective, having gotten out of the military myself, and been lucky enough to go through the service to CEO and journey into small business. So I'm looking at it from that perspective. Just so happens to be I'm in the insurance space for the most part, but that comes up a lot when it comes to retirement planning, and so that's the perspective I'm bringing to this. But my journey really coming out of the Rosie Network started in 2017. That's when I got into small business ownership myself, and what I'm really grateful for is it also allowed my wife Jen to re-engage with the community, because she's a Gold Star daughter, and that led her to start her own podcast called Holding Down the Fort. And she's interviewed a lot of military spouses and veteran entrepreneurs, and been able to share their stories. So we're very grateful for that as well. Because we understand the unique value that the Rosie Network has brought to the military community. And so, again, super grateful for Robinhood for helping support that mission. So, again, today I'm not here to talk to you about what you should or shouldn't do for your retirement, but rather, share some insights and stories I've gleaned from the many hundreds of conversations I've had with military retirees and veterans as they've gotten out. So, not going to be giving you the textbook retirement planning stuff today, but so not what you should do with your stocks and bonds, but some bigger insights. Because what I've observed is that retirement isn't about a finish line; it's about having enough flexibility to choose your next move, and that's when, if you see it that way, everything changes and more opportunities or confidence open up about your retirement. So, to help frame today's discussion, we're going to be addressing the realities of today's rapidly changing world. And again, this conversation isn't about stock tips. It's about looking at your flexibility, identity, and income choice. And this matters because a lot of the retirement planning out there is meant for the masses. So that's all good stuff, of course. I just want to add some layers on top of it. So whether you're 5 years away from retirement or 40, I want to give you a framework to help you make choices that you feel are smarter for you. So it's on your terms and not necessarily somebody else's. Uh, Quick disclosure, that this is not meant to be investment advice, purely educational, nor is it a solicitation for any services. And so if you are ever making big decisions about your money or investments or taxes, make sure you are doing your own research and consulting with professionals when needed, who understand your specific situation, because everything around investment and financial decisions, of course, does involve risk, and you don't want to risk making bad decisions there. So with that out of the way, one of the things that I think is important is looking at the bigger picture. Where do we stand today in the modern economy? Just the realities of where retirement planning's shifted and evolved in the last, not last many decades, let alone very recently. And it's not just about stock market volatility that happens day to day or week to week. We all know that happens, but I want to help you understand the bigger picture of what's happening. And so I look at it from three big areas. demographics, the economy itself, and the way that the government, the way that retirement planning works with all the rules and regulations with the government. So, in the demographics, we're seeing something that has never really happened before. We have an aging population, specifically with the baby boomers. They're living longer than was anticipated and not necessarily living as well. So we have an environment with increasing healthcare costs and needs to help them survive through retirement longer. So that's causing a lot more stress on savings. And so they're having to hold on to their wealth, which means they're not necessarily able to or passing it along like was expected. And on the flip side of that, we have a much lower birth rate. So our younger population there's not as many of them. So when you think about sustaining the benefits for the older populations, we have a problem coming up where there aren't enough to guarantee those benefits are going to be there. So that means, hey, we're going to have to consider maybe things we were planning for aren't going to be there. We're going to have to take care of that ourselves. So just something to consider. The other aspect with that a younger population is the economic reality. We don't have the security of jobs that we've had. That's kind of probably why a lot of us ended up in self-employment or entrepreneurship. So that's happening not just in military circles and veteran circles, but in the greater economy as well. Which means, and with the cost of with the rising inflation that we've had, people aren't able to save as much anymore. The majority of the stock market investing is with 10% of the population has got most of the money in the 401ks. So we have a problem there with just a lot of fluctuations on any sort of predictability on how the markets are going to perform. So the story is there just saving money in your 401ks and IRAs. Like, yes, of course, we want to be doing that kind of stuff, but it's the uncertainty of knowing that how it works today is how it's going to work 30 years from now. I just don't feel is realistic because if we think about the new tech economy we are in right now, this is a new disruption. So this is another big thing that has never happened before. I mean, we think about things like AI as a recent change in our economy, but it's really started ever since the internet age, and it's still very young. So we learned that as business owners, getting on the internet has changed the ability for us to generate income from our businesses, and that's going to also change how we can invest and manage our retirement as well, because things like social media, even the iPhone, they're really only 10, 15 years old. So it's still a very young environment. AI is really flipping the script on all this stuff. So being aware that that might be a good thing for our retirement planning, but it's going to be shifting, and just assuming that the way it worked in the 80s and 90s, I just don't think is going to be enough to make sure we're aware of the entire environment. And so that, of course, plays into the uncertainty of government benefits. Again, and a third big thing that kind of hasn't ever happened before in our history is just we know we have large deficits. It's not a political thing. It just happens every year now. We have higher spending. It doesn't seem to go down. And because our populations are older, we have a lot of unfunded liabilities, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that, again, our younger population isn't quite enough of them to pay for it. So does that mean taxes are going to go up? Considering all these future changes are going to be very relevant. So um, the moral of the story here is adaptability, and I'll talk a little bit about why that's an advantage we have coming out of the military community and as small business owners, because the reality is most of this stuff is out of our control. So I want to talk about the stuff today that can be in your control. What will impact your retirement the most? And while the age we all hear growing up is, hey, I want to work to age 65 and retire, and then go get a vacation home or sit on the front porch and hang out. That's great, and hopefully, if that is your goal, like, stick to it. But maybe it's not just about an age anymore. Maybe there's other aspects of, when you think about stopping working for somebody else, because that's really what retirement means. It doesn't necessarily mean the that sense of I'm hitting a certain age, I have a certain nest egg, and therefore I'm done. Because retirement planning essentially was built around the way the Social Security system was set up back in the 1930s when life expectancy was 61. So people are now living in well into their 80s and 90s and beyond. So that's a much longer time to plan for having to survive off your post working age income. And so retirement isn't just a single moment in life anymore. It might be decades that we have to plan for. So nothing wrong with aiming for age 65, but for some, it's a meaningful milestone. And for others, there will become a point where your body just says, "Hey, I got to be done," and so we need to be ready for that as well. But since things are evolved, people working longer, living longer, or maybe they just not wanting to stop for the sake of stopping, we have to ask, what else should we be planning for besides just a number or an age? So, if retirement isn't just about hitting an age or chasing a number, how else can we think about it? And I like to think about it as a pro. And I talk about this a lot with military transition as well. So when you're getting out of the military and going through a job hunt, I say, why not think about this as your own individual business? Even if you're searching for a job, when you're putting your resumes together, learning how to do interviews, if we treat it more professionally, then we take more ownership and control over the outcomes. And I think here's our opportunity, especially for those of us out of the Rosie Network who are already thinking about operating in self-employment, because that's what retirement is. It's replacing income, right? Finding a new job is replacing income. Starting a business is replacing income. So let's think about it that way. And the pros now uh, create systems around their business. They don't just outsource and hope it works out for them. So by creating systems, you're going to have better habits and, again, take ownership of the outcome. So if we contrast that with how most people approach retirement, they're outsourcing their plan to 401ks and just hoping that the stock market behaves. So amateurs hope, pros prepare, and that's a big lesson I've learned from my years in working in this industry. So the rest of the talk, I want to share some non-traditional frameworks that you could consider implementing that might come in handy at some point. Whenever this topic comes up, that you can always say, all right, maybe I'll add one of these frameworks and see if it might be relevant to me right now. And then share my story a little bit. I didn't always think about this stuff this way. I had my own transition out of the military that was chaotic. I didn't really have a plan. My only plan was I happened to be stationed in Germany when I got out, and I wanted to stay there. And that's how I stumbled into financial services. Got recruited in. Hey, this sounds like a good job. Flexible hours. Essentially, it was my first introduction to self-employment. I misunderstood that I was actually in a sales job, which is also important in business. But I thought, the idea of helping people, prepare for their investing and saving in the future was something with purpose. It gave me something to do and also allowed me to live the lifestyle that I was looking to live at the time. Problem was, this was back in 2008. And the week I started was the same week Lehman Brothers had collapsed. So for those of us who are old enough to remember the last financial crisis, I didn't know who Lehman Brothers was at the time, but I watched the other members in my firm and their clients just very uncertain, very scared about what was happening, and realizing that it didn't matter how well they had prepared and planned when things are out of their control, they just started, acting emotionally. And so we want to try to take emotion out of this as much as possible, especially with the long-term, more risk-based investments, so that when these market fluctuations happen, you can know which of your dollars are worth waiting on to come back. But also keep in mind that if you're planning on retiring in the year that happens to be the year another crisis happens, because we don't know when it's going to happen, but there's always going to be a market correction. That's just the way the market works. It doesn't just keep going up every year. So being prepared to not do what happened to a lot of the people I saw in that year, where when the market was down, they went to cash, and so they sold at the bottom, and they didn't get back into the market. It started coming up again, so they missed most of the upside, and just everybody was upset the whole time. So I saw that frustration, and that really kind of shook me and made me realize long-term retirement planning is easy to look good on paper. You can always do projections and charts, but unless we're understanding what could happen in a given moment, we have a risk there. And my next wake up call happened when a client I had that I was working with had saved very well, had an inheritance, and had already by age 40 saved $750,000 in retirement account, which is well above average, especially for that age. Coming out of the military, had a good job, was making great income, also working overseas in Germany, and on paper he was doing great. Real confident with his investments. I really wasn't even helping that much. He just wanted somebody to talk to. But the one thing he did ask me was, "Hey Scott, I hate my job. I make good money, sure, but I'd really like to take a year off and go down and work with charities in Africa." Because that's what he would do when he would take his vacations. He'd fly down for 2 weeks, and he just wanted to do it for a full year. And he asked me, could I take some of my money out of my retirement accounts to go do that? And I said, hey, it's your money. You do what you want with it. But he was of course worried. Hey, this is my retirement dollars. I got to pay penalties if I were to do that. And yeah, talking with friends and families, he ended up not doing it. And I just always wondered, you know, how do you decide what the right decision is? They didn't like the job they were in, had saved well, just happened to have the money in retirement specific accounts, but limited his ability to go do a different mission. And so I think about it, from our perspectives, what if his next mission, wasn't going to be a charity, but maybe start a business or start a nonprofit, and he just limited his ability to do that, and just simply because he didn't feel like he had other assets saved in locations or types of accounts that he could access more confidently. So that was another wake up call for me, because I started thinking, what's the point of saving the money if you can't use it confidently when it matters? And sometimes that's an emergency or a challenge that pops up, but oftentimes, and I see this a lot in the veteran community, is new opportunity or just wanting to take advantage of, hey, I don't have to follow orders anymore, but I don't want to wait till age 60. Okay, so there's that gap that we have that's unique, because you can't go to the average. When people talk about retirement planning for the average civilian, they're not accounting for what we have in our community. Coming out of the military as a military family, whether you do a career or not, we're already having a major life shift. Most people just don't have that. So I think a lot of times we look at that as a challenge in our community. I think we can start looking at it as an opportunity. Sure, it's always going to be a few years of letting things play out, but how do we think about our money so that we can take advantage of it? So that's my back. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to jump in because you brought up a really great point, and I wanted to kind of add a thought and also a little bit of data to kind of put it into some of what you said into perspective.
Data helps.
Studies now we know that on average, when a military spouse retires or her service member retires, when they get out, a military spouse has on average $20,000 in retirement savings. Okay. That's it. So, and we also know statistically that military spouses make or at least contribute significantly to all of the financial decisions for a military family. And sometimes that, as you know, is because the service member is deploying or going off on training or out on a ship or whatever the case may be, we're seeing today's military spouses take a much more active and educated role in financial planning and including retirement for military families. So a lot of really savvy folks in this space are recognizing, hey, we really need to engage with the military spouses who are the fastest growing and highest of any segment in our country when it comes to startups. I mean, we have 12 million military spouse and veteran spouses in this country, and 48% of them surveyed statistically are saying that they're either already self-employed or they're interested in pursuing self-employment, small business ownership. So I think that is hugely important when we have this conversation. We also have to recognize that, as you said, your friend may have retired with this nice nest egg, but most of them don't. And the other really quick point is, and I come across this all the time, like I talk to entrepreneurs all across the country, and I find myself saying, okay, you're unemployed or you're retired or you're getting ready to retire. What is the downside of becoming self-employed? Right. And I think that, that's something on our end that we're working on, kind of putting some of this information together. Like what is the upside versus the downside? I mean, if you're self-employed, then tax-wise, you enter into you have things that you can legally write off that you can't if you're an employee, right? I mean, there's all kinds of benefits, and it this information is online, but you really would spend a lifetime trying to figure out, how does that apply for your state? All kinds of other questions. So I think that's something too, that in these conversations that we have, and like your friend, like you just mentioned, he could have started a nonprofit. Obviously it has to be legal and above board. Let's make that clear. But done that through through a nonprofit. So I think we're, kind of being able to integrate that conversation into the messaging around, retiring or saving or planning or what's your next purpose or mission in life. I mean, some of us are out there plugging that, going, hey, have you thought about this? Here's some things you should know before you make a decision. So thank you for letting me jump in.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, yeah, you make a good point because here on the next slide, I was just going to point out a little bit about what makes the advantages that we have when it comes to retirement planning coming from the veteran community is that we do tend to lean more towards self-employment. 45% are more likely to be self-employed. So again, if we're thinking about retirement in that way, anyways, then maybe the opportunity is having that business that generates income being the retirement plan versus just how's my 401k doing. And so our advantages there, of course, are having the built-in community. That's huge. Civilians just don't have that. Are we thinking about that as a retirement asset, right? Well, how's our mindset around that? Our just general adaptability to change and adjust. We understand the economy's changing, so I think that works to our advantage. Having that sense of purpose, not just okay, my nest egg's big enough, I can finally stop working. That works for a lot of people, maybe not for everybody in the military community. I don't want to allow that to backfire. And again, the ability to deal with risk in a different way, which allows us to do things like, hey, I'm going to go out and start my own business and allow that to be my retirement plan. Like that, a lot of veterans and military spouses have success that way. Doesn't make it any easier, but at least you're now in more control if you're considering that as an option. It could be part of your overall portfolio, but underlying that, we have our foundations of VA benefits, military pensions if you do a full career, even things like GI Bill, healthcare access. So you're not starting at zero, no matter where you feel like you are at when it comes to how much dollars you have in retirement accounts right now. Where you still have a leg up, so make sure we're taking advantage of that, and not not letting it beat you down too much. But um, some of the, just hit on these myths just a little bit more. Um, yes, having a big nest egg retires when you for retirement is important, but I like to think of it as instead of how much money is in the bank account, what are the streams of income going to be? So we think about it that way. And then also, that retirement doesn't just mean I'm stopping to work completely. It's more about a pivot, a change. Could mean switching careers, or it could mean just doing something or less of stuff that you don't enjoy as much. But we also understand that um, relying on just your military pension, we're finding isn't enough these days in most cases. Just obviously depending on what state where you're going to be living, and then Social Security for sure is just not going to be enough. So we do have to be planning for sources of income, not just having a bigger number in our bank account.
Scott, can
So.
I ask you a quick question?
Mhm.
Speaking of the state, um, do you find veterans tend to retire and stay in this, well, stay in the state they're retiring in, or are you finding that they're moving back where they have family or things like that? I mean, I'm just curious.
Coming out of the military when they're
Yeah,
retiring,
yeah,
for the most part, recently people are trying to tap into local networks and local job opportunities that I've seen,
okay,
regardless of where that might be. Usually if they're retiring near a military facility, that's just they're finding similar roles that way,
yeah.
or they're moving to a prior duty station where maybe they have a home or something like that. So I don't see very many people hunting to find the lowest cost of living. But I might be working with a particular audience that looks at it differently. A lot of people I talk to are retiring in D.C. They're going to stay in the Northern Virginia area, for
Yeah.
example,
Well, just for your knowledge and
or
everybody
San Diego.
else's, yeah. Although you just labeled two of the highest cost of living
Yeah,
areas
yeah, yeah,
in the country. And I will say, for everyone listening, that if they go to MOAA.org,
hmm
and we'll post the link, that organization provides the most up-to-date and comprehensive list of states and how they impact veterans. So whether or not they tax fully or partially your retirement, your disability, and survivor benefit plans, they basically break it down what where they are now, if there's pending legislation, that kind of stuff. So and I find it really, really great, informative information, and folks ask me that all the time. So
yeah. I
just,
mean,
yeah,
definitely take a look at each state's benefit. Um, I guess I look at it from the perspective of, especially for the self-employed, like
yeah,
if we're self-employed, we're not basing our everything's not based on a salary. You're not necessarily trading time for money. Essentially, the income's unlimited at that point. If you're going to be a business owner, and from that perspective, the amount of savings and taxes from one state to the next on a little bit of a benefit, um, yes, it's meaningful, but in the big scheme of just the way the cost of living of everything is and where things are going, it's not going to be a huge mover. I'm just trying to, being realistic. The big mover
yeah,
is how do I turn my skills and my time into more sources of income? And if you got to pay higher
right.
taxes on that, it's still more. it's it, and having more opportunities for income is where you get more control.
Yeah, I think it is critical, obviously, for business tax, but it also plays a big role in, or the state you choose if you're running a business,
Yeah.
whether or not you have employees or independent contractors.
Oh
So,
yeah. Yeah. Then it gets.
an employee can cost you around 30% more than per employee than an independent contractor, and states like mine, California, it is incredibly difficult to meet the threshold to validate somebody that you've hired as an independent contractor versus whether or not they legally have to be an employee. So, there's all kinds of things to consider when you're retiring. And, that's certainly, for those that are business mindset, questions and things that we address and face a lot. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We posted the
Yeah, for sure.
moa.org link. So if you want to know, if you're thinking about moving, um, check it out. It's got a lot of great information on there. Thanks again.
Yeah, and actually, that's brings up another good example for story I wanted to share for someone, a friend of mine named Mike Wallace, who kind of looked at retirement differently, because for him it wasn't about stopping; it was about making a choice. And he did move across states. This is my friend Captain Mike Wallace. He retired out of the Navy about 10 years ago. He had done 30 years, so he had his pension, and he went and got a job at Amazon. So he did move. He went to Seattle because that's where the headquarters was. But um, when he was there, he started working with as a mid-level executive. So he's getting his salary and all the benefits, and he just planned on doing that for a while. And he had a meaningful role because he was helping build up Amazon Air at the time. Um, but his former fighter pilot buddies started hitting him up all the time, asking, like, "Hey, Mike, how'd you get that job?" As they were retiring a few years later. How do I do resumes? How do I do interviews? What am I worth? How do I negotiate? And he just started helping these guys find their next career. And then he realized that there's a need here that I happen to be good at filling for them, and he found it fulfilling, and so he made a pivot. He didn't retire from Amazon, but he did stop working there, and he stopped working for income, and he created a small consulting firm. We moved back to the East Coast, and that's what he does full time now. Yeah, he doesn't do it for income. He charges a little bit of money to help cover costs and stuff. He's not a nonprofit, but it's for him, it's more about the mission and giving back. He had set himself up for retirement to be able to maintain a sense of purpose, but he's still working full time, essentially doing that. So I find that to be a meaningful example of someone who's redefined their new identity, both in post military life. He first went into standard employment, but then went into essentially small business, of course, when you're in a consulting role. But he's doing that, in a retirement role as well. And so when we think about framing, retirement, and so this is where I want to talk about our main three aspects of retirement. Most people think about retirement just it's all about money. How much do I have in the bank account? What age do I want to retire? And what I think gets left out are the other aspects, the health. That's a big one we'll talk about in a second. And like I mentioned with Mike, maintaining that sense of purpose and identity. If you find it in your new career and you want to keep working till you're in your 70s, of course, that's awesome. But we just find the reality is most veterans end up having to move jobs multiple times, or eventually are seeking that either income or identity and sense of purpose through small business or self-employment. So having that flexibility for retirement is important as well, and that's why having financial flexibility to be able to make those changes, to confidently be able to do that, so you don't get stuck somewhere where you're frustrated or have a health issue that can impact that. So let's start with health. You probably heard this a lot of times before. Your health is your wealth, and we say that all the time. But when was the last time you thought about your health today with retirement in mind? Literally thinking about, if we're thinking about investing for retirement, is investing in your health not a huge impact on how your retirement will look like? Think about it. So, but mostly because we're always focused on calculating growth rates, savings goals, we forget about that health is the biggest way or the most likely way to lose financial flexibility down the road. Okay, so if your body breaks down, it gets a lot more expensive very fast. I'm even dealing with that with my own mother recently. So, huge part of my purpose right now, as my mother's health declined, I realized a few years ago I was 100 pounds overweight, and I saw her mobility uh, dwindle very rapidly, and I just thought, I'm for me personally, I know how to do this better. I came out of the army. I know how to eat healthy, and so I'm gonna I'm gonna fix it. So I went and lost all the weight, and I focus now on I do CrossFit, stay mobile, and I'm gonna keep doing that into my 90s is my goal. That's my retirement plan, is stay mobile into 90s. I don't even care how much money I have. That's not my priority. Health is the priority because I've just seen too many people very wealthy not able to enjoy it. And again, what's the point of saving the money if you can't use it? And
Yeah,
go ahead.
Scott, I'm sorry. I'm
All good.
trying to,
you're
um,
you're the boss.
yeah. I just wanted to add that, what we find, since we're talking about the military community, is that a significant number of military spouses too, and of course I, am one, um, become caregivers,
Yeah.
right, after post-retirement. So I think that is also, when you talk about health is your wealth, and just the whole, that mental health, physical health mindset, recognizing that these are things that, our military families should be spending, and the DoD, quite frankly, should be doing a better job of. But recognizing that in many, many cases, including mine, which I never even thought of myself as a caregiver, but when Tom retired, he was 100% permanently disabled. So, that's also something I think that those of us that deal with military families need to keep in mind, that the likelihood of the spouse typically becoming a caregiver is significant, and that's something you need to plan for, right?
Yeah. No, I
Okay.
mean, regardless of the VA disability rating, the likelihood is that a female spouse is going to survive the male retiree if that's the makeup of the couple. And poor health is the top reason retirees withdraw savings faster than planned. Chronic illness tends to be the major driver of that. And just to look at some stats here, um, again, longevity is changing. We've talked about how people are living longer. So the average life expectancy in the U.S. is now around 77 years old. So retirement planning started when people were 61 on average. Now it's 77, and we've heard in the news in recent years, oh, it's actually come down a few years, and that might be, but the stat still is once you hit age 65, you've likely got another 20 years ahead of you. So 1 in 3 65-year-olds will live past 90. 1 in 7 will live past 95. So that's 2 decades or more of retirement planning when the system was set up to maybe live, 5 to 10 years afterwards. So that's a long retirement. So outliving your retirement savings isn't theory anymore. Again, top concern for retirees. So chronic illness, again, is a major driving factor. The average couple, as you can see here, will spend $315,000 to cover health care. So 70% of Americans over age 65 will require long-term care at some point, with 20% needing that care more than 5 years. And the average cost in today's dollars right now for a nursing home is $100,000 per year. So compare that to your mortgage. All right. Um, but again, thinking of investing in your health, retirees in good health spend approximately 30% less on medical costs than those with chronic conditions. So, 30% of an investment portfolio is a pretty good rate of return, right? So that's why I think this is just overlooked when we're considering, sure, we can plan and get more long term care or health care insurances, but maybe it's better to need it, or not plan to need it, or plan to need it just in case, but to not have to use it. And therefore, Worst case, maybe you're leaving more as a legacy to your beneficiaries, to your children, or something like that. We'd rather do that than just pay it to healthcare facilities, I'm sure. Um, this might be good or bad stat. Veterans tend to, I don't have stats on military spouses, but veterans tend to live longer than their civilian peers. Now, that might be due to either just better awareness of general health. I think that's true, but it also might be access to more healthcare facilities, VA, TRICARE, and just being able to use those things longer. So the fact that we do have that support, maybe you wouldn't have to considerably spend as much for healthcare and retirement as your civilian counterparts if you can rely on the VA. However, um, you know, you choose your quality by privatization, right? Like anything else. We love our VA and all of our government benefits and survivor benefits and all that stuff, but Stephanie, as you've shared, it doesn't always work out as well as you'd like it to, as quickly at least. So, next pillar um, is community, maintaining your purpose and identity through not becoming invisible, is the way I put it. I work, since I do work with a lot of people coming out of the military looking through for that new job. It's their first retirement, it's their military retirement, and then they're thinking. They say to me often, um, Scott, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And these are 50-year-olds, right? And they got another 10, 15, 20 years ahead of them. And so oftentimes they take that next role just for that paycheck and just to save for retirement, forgetting that they're going to hit 65. And even if they do retire with the big nest egg, that question's never going to go away, right? So taking advantage of this unique opportunity that we have right now, and us as small business owners, we get it. It's all sales and marketing. One way or the other, you're going to have to learn to communicate to build your network. And so it doesn't always have to be what's in it for me. It can be, what's in it for those I'm meant to serve. Making myself available and visible is also a way to give back. And I think, yeah, sure, do it now to help you get that better job, to find the right fit as you're thinking about, um, staying connected in a post-military world. The risks or the costs of not doing it, I think, are a couple. One is while you're still looking for income or in the building stage, risk not getting the right employers or collaborators, partners. Or if you're finding clients for your business, finding mentors or mentees, um, being active even just on LinkedIn is doing wonders for those who know how to use it and actually try to learn the skill set of the marketplace that we're in. We are in a digital world. If we ignore it, it's not like you can't get all these things. It's not like you can't retire and have a great network of local people. But if you do want to connect more, the reality is people are looking online, and whether you like it or not, they're looking for you. And if you're not there, then you're invisible, essentially, right? Also, when it comes to if you're still in employment or looking for clients, um, the avoiding a bad fit. I think taking advantage of being visible online allows the right people to find you, and especially in this competitive economy, one of the things that I think, especially on LinkedIn, I don't say everybody has to be on LinkedIn, but if we think about it this way, the average C-suite level or executive level person on LinkedIn has about 1,000 connections, but only about 1% of all LinkedIn users post on a regular basis. So if you're connected to those type of people or aim to be, and you're even doing a little bit of activity on there, you're just simply more likely to show up and be remembered. And I hear all sorts of stories of people who have amazing connections just by posting something they were afraid of posting, but they told an honest story, and a bunch of people reached out to them, and something happened. And I'll tell another quick story here of someone that happened to a friend of mine. You might have seen John McCaskill. He's on LinkedIn. He's big on LinkedIn now. But when I met him about 6 years ago here in Virginia Beach, he was just hosting a local networking event, and we got to talking and stayed connected on LinkedIn. And through LinkedIn, I introduced him to a yoga instructor I knew from a business retreat I had gone to. This guy Will here on the left, and Will had nothing to do with military or veterans. He was in New York City. He calls himself a yoga instructor for Wall Street guys. And but I introduced the two of them because John was big into mindfulness, and they got to talking. And next thing we know, they started a podcast, and they have now interviewed all sorts of authors, and their whole, one, their current careers have changed. It's led to consulting for corporations and speaking gigs. But, when I think of John, when I met him, he was going through his own military retirement at the time. He didn't know what he wanted to do when he grew up, but he was willing to explore. He had, worked with a couple nonprofits, but he knew he didn't want to go to the corporate gig. So I don't know what his current long term retirement plan is now, but I know it's very different than what it was just a few years ago. And I think it's just really cool that this story started from a conversation offline that stayed connected online and then allowed another conversation online to happen. And over time that manifested into, because they now are doing their networking digitally by sharing their voices. Again, this is all just communication, so it could be one-on-one or one to many. But now, their sense of purpose, their ability to generate income, their ability to have community, and happens to be health related. It's just, they can do so much with this, and they've inspired a lot of people, myself included. I just happen to be the one that introduced them, and it's just, a story I'm real proud of.
Yeah, I love that story. And John is amazing, but I think I just want to emphasize the word network. We are the Rosie Network. I mean, there was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
real reason why network was in there. Because we are really, we're as strong as our weakest connection. And I couldn't agree with you more. LinkedIn is an amazing, and I know you are a pro at LinkedIn, so we're going to have you back to help, our business owners and our network sort of navigate. I know I need to continue to learn how to use LinkedIn with purpose. And that's the other thing you touched on. Everybody needs a purpose, and we see it, sadly, all too often when we have those who've served, we lose them because in one of the reasons is, they just a loss of purpose, that loss of tribe, of community, of brotherhood, sisterhood, right? And that
Yeah.
loss of purpose. So being on a network, networking and connecting with other people is part of that mental health.
No,
And
100%.
which can, in this case, obviously evolve to financial health too, but just don't let yourself be alone. Don't, get out
Yeah.
there, connect with people, like-minded people, shared stories, shared experiences. And I mean, we see it at Rosie all the time. It's truly a powerful thing. So
Yeah.
thank you for
And
mentioning that.
yeah, and the cool thing is it doesn't just have to be LinkedIn. That's just the low hanging fruit because it's where a lot of people are. But there's obviously so many different ways to tap into networks. It's just that the digital world. Look at us talking right now, versus having to fly somewhere, everybody meet up, and you can just do it so much easier. But you have to be willing to put yourself out there and share a story, or be the person who helps others share their stories. You'd be really surprised how much that can impact your ability to create opportunities for yourself and others. And it's a great it's a new world we're in, and not everybody's going to take advantage of it, but for those who do, it works. It really works. And the cool thing is, because we can have micro communities, it's not like you have to go become an influencer and that's not the point. It's just, you can find those. Again, the phrase I like is find those whom you're meant to serve, and only those whom you're meant to serve. And with the world we're in right now, you just don't have an excuse for it, to not do it if that's meaningful for you. If you don't need it, then understandable. Not saying you got to do it. But that gets into our last pillar here. The idea of when we're thinking about financial flexibility, I like to think about it from systems versus goals. A goal, again, is I want to retire at age 65. I want to have $1 million in my nest egg. It's like, of course, sure. But do we even know what $1 million is really going to be worth in 20 or 30 years? It's not. It's really not. Will it be enough? I've seen a lot of people save up their big nest egg, and then they kind of just go, well, I don't need it because I'm not going to go buy anything, or I'm not increasing my lifestyle, so it just grows, which is of course great, and they just leave a bigger nest egg to their kid, um, and great, they leave a legacy. Maybe that's important for them as well, but um, knowing the changing landscape, I want to think about building systems of income as our unique opportunity or even necessity, right now in today's environment. So here's the typical goals-based approach, and the reality is most of us are still going to do all these things, and they're important, and they of course matter. Um, but they're fixed points on the map. And if we get too focused on just these points, what opportunities might we not feel confident taking advantage of, or what might derail our plan in the future if life throws us a curveball, right? So I like to think about retirement planning not just as one destination along this path, but being financially ready for whatever outcomes present themselves. So, a couple of frameworks I put together that I feel allow us to think about, rather than when we think about diversification of, here's my retirement account, I need to put, 20% in bonds, 80% in stocks, or throw some crypto and some gold in there. Like, of course, how you manage your retirement portfolio is important, but I want to think about the system of, what is the purpose of this dollar, and think about more of the phases of retirement. So, in the while you're younger, we're in the building phase. We got to accumulate assets, but oftentimes we're forgetting, how am I distributing those assets later on and protecting it, regardless of what might happen. So it's important to think about the distribution of our retirement account, because that's ultimately where taxes come into play. And so when we're thinking about the types of money of where we're saving it, there's essentially three different types of money. If where you put the money, it's either taxable now, meaning when you save and invest, that money is already taxed, and then you also pay taxes on the growth or the capital gains or the dividends or the income you receive from that investment. So that could be a stock brokerage portfolio, could be a real estate investment, could be a business investment. So however you're investing in a non-qualified account, then you're going to have to pay taxes in and out. So it's important to understand the distribution while you're accumulating that money. The next type of money is when we're thinking about retirement specific dollars. These are, again, qualified retirement accounts or employee sponsored retirement plans. So 401ks, TSP, 403bs, 457s. IRAs are individual retirement accounts, two different types. In this bucket, the tax deferred bucket, it's a traditional retirement account. So a lot of people started with traditional before Roths came out, which means if you still want to save in a traditional account, you get to save some in taxes today as you put in your money in. That reduces your taxable income today. But again, at distribution, that money is fully taxable as income. So if you've got a traditional TSP and your military pension, once you start pulling money out of TSP, it's going to go right on top of your pension as income. So now this red bucket typically can't touch that or don't want to touch it until age 60. Otherwise, there's penalties. But also, there's what's called required minimum distributions. So when you're thinking about setting up, maybe you're setting up an employee sponsored plan for your business or your company, thinking about what your employees would want to have available to them. What's going to be the best benefit? Maybe saving taxes today isn't as advantageous as it would be down the road on bigger buckets of money. So third bucket of money is the tax advantaged or the tax free bucket. This is where we're typically thinking about Roth IRAs or Roth TSP, Roth 401ks. That's become more available. However, there's also limitations there on how much you can put in. And if you're making too much income, it's now up to like 260. If you're making more than 267,000, I think this year as a joint family, then you're not even allowed to contribute to a Roth IRA. But with your employer sponsored plan, if they have a Roth option, you can do that. But again, those accounts do have limits on how much you can put in. Outside of Roth IRAs, the only tax advantaged place to put money are some types of life insurance accounts, but those have additional costs and access limitations as well. So there's no easy way to do any of these things, but just important to think about as you're accumulating assets, which bucket, which taxable bucket am I putting this money in? Do I know why? Am I putting all the money in the tax deferred bucket and don't have any liquid assets? Because the taxable money, the good thing about that is you can at least access it if you need it, and you can manage taxes based on if you're taking losses in a given year. Stuff gets very complicated, but at least you have more control over it. More rules on the employee sponsored and qualified retirement accounts. So a lot of
And
details on.
and
Go ahead.
one thing I don't see in here is if you have kids, the majority of military families do. We learned
Mhm.
this the hard way. Um, there are, no tax for opening up educational accounts for your kids.
Yeah,
Tom
529.
and I did that, and Wesley is able to take advantage of that tax free while he's in college. Also, your TSP, for those that don't know, is a thrift savings plan. It's what you put into when you're serving in the military. Tom served for 30 years, so his was, a nice chunk of change. But the new rules, or at least the new rules are if, and I hate to say it's not the fun conversation to have, but when you're doing retirement planning, you also need to be doing estate planning. In my humble
Yeah.
opinion, if you leave your loved ones and you don't have your estate planning buckled down, trust me, the state will come in and take a percentage. In California, if you have assets that are more than, I think it's $100,000, the state by law gets to step in and, it's going to cost you money. So don't do that to your family. But if you leave your TSP to a minor or your child, they now have to take out a percentage. They can't hold on to it forever until they retire. They have to
Wow.
take out all of it within a certain number of years. So just all those kinds of things are really
Yeah. I
uh,
mean,
great things to know. Yeah.
That's yeah,
All right, Scott.
definitely. I mean, California is an interesting state when it comes to all this stuff. Now heard they're taxing people for leaving the state. So, um,
Yeah.
I mean, that's when it has become relevant to know about your state. But ultimately, when it for all these types of accounts, make sure that you have your beneficiaries designated.
Yeah.
It would at some point. It's just having a will isn't necessarily enough because if you don't
Yep.
clearly designate it based on that state's rules, um, you want to avoid probate, and the only way to do it is to understand that state's rules. So you're going to have to go talk to some sort of a lawyer or estate planner to make
Yeah.
sure you're good in your
And
situation.
we have an
So
incredible network of folks, military spouse attorneys who specialize in this.
okay, good, yeah.
So, I mean, it's really critical. I mean, not to bring up the sad part, but I mean, 4 years ago,
Well,
this is the hard lesson we learned, including survivor benefit. Please do your due diligence and look into what that, please talk to somebody in the know, about whether or not survivor benefit plan is the right choice for you when your service member retires.
yeah. Actually,
Thanks.
one of the things I've been doing with the new AI economy, I learned to code and I built out a survivor benefit plan calculator. So Stephanie,
Ah,
I'll have to
well,
get your thoughts on how that's working.
well, we need to share that out, Scott,
Yeah, yeah.
because
Well,
it is the question that, everybody's asking, when they retire, should they do
yeah,
survivor benefit plan?
and
Um,
you're right. It's like retirement planning, I'm trying to think of the good aspects of saving for the future and stuff. And it's just like, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, of talking about the health and the cost and the
Yeah.
taxes and all of it. It's just like, I'm just being realistic of unfortunately the way things work. And so,
Well, those who served in their families deserve to be informed and
yeah.
educated and have a trusted network that they can turn to for questions, support, and advice. So thank you for that. And I apologize. I know I'm taking us over. So, but hopefully, we're sharing some relevant information, at
No,
least on
I
my
mean, yeah,
part. So
absolutely. I mean, you're seeing real time, situations and stuff, and so I'm hitting on big picture. If it's coming up with a relevant story, then that's important. And so, one of the ways to avoid some of these struggles, I think, is to diversify via your timing of where you're putting your money. To always thinking about having a now, next, and not yet bucket. The not yet bucket is that's your retirement funds, but if you're worried about risk or in how the stock market's performing and knowing that we've got to take risk, we've got to deal with the market fluctuations if we're going to be able to keep up with inflation, that having some money, unlike my client I about in the beginning, in a now bucket or a next bucket, um, is what causes people to kind of make those emotional decisions. So, whether timing diversification or emotional diversification, having confidence of what changes might happen in the short term. And again, coming out of the military, we can oftentimes plan for that or expect it or want to do it. Hey, I'm going to get out of the military, do a job for a couple of years, but I am planning on starting a business at some point. So have money set aside, in that bucket that isn't, locked up in an account where you can't touch it until you're at age 60. So, and last couple things I wanted to hit on were just ways to think about where to get income and sense of purpose in community, and in that when you do start thinking about full-time retirement, obviously if you got your pension and VA benefits, it's typically not going to be enough, but a great foundation. So if you've earned it, congratulations on that. Having some savings and investment in retirement accounts like the TSP and the IRAs. Of course, there's only so many places you can put money. So at some point, you're going to have to probably participate in the stock market, the bond market, maybe even crypto. I don't discount any of that stuff. We don't know exactly what the dollar, our mechanism of currency is going to be. That might be changing if we're being realistic. So, being open to those types of investments, as you feel comfortable managing them, or find a professional to help you manage them. Just understand the costs and the risks involved in all that. But when it comes down to controlling your sources of income, we see a lot of veterans and military spouses have success in real estate. Lots of ways to participate in this market. You can, be a property owner and get rental income. That's a business. You can flip houses. That's a business. You can own a property, live in it, and sell it at some point, or do what even talked about last time: reverse mortgages. Lots of ways to use real estate to protect your retirement opportunities, or even become a licensed real estate agent. All these things can be done. Not as They don't have to be full time jobs. They can be on the side while you're in retirement, or even while you're employed right now. But a different way of learning how to produce income. It's a skill set. I personally, not a real estate person. What I like doing is consulting and project based work, which can lead into online businesses or freelance. So my friend Mike, I told the story about, um, and John and Will with the yoga mindfulness stuff. They're doing versions of these, but freelancing can be even. Hey, maybe you have a very specific skill set. Maybe you are learning to code, or you're a good graphic artist. On the side, there's lots of ways to do this, or maybe you just want to help out a nonprofit with your skill set if you got the free time. So, um, ways to stay meaningful and potentially get income, but I like to think of it as learn rare and valuable skills. Even though a lot of people are online, again, only 1% of the people are posting on LinkedIn. Only 1% of the people are learning how to code, to use AI. So be one of the 1%. they're not college degrees in this. We can learn this stuff on a weekend and apply it on Monday, and it's just going to be useful for us at all stages of life, either for purpose or income. And the last one I think is why I like to think of myself with the Rosie Network. Be a brand ambassador. So maybe you're already set for retirement or set for your job, but you need that extra sense of purpose. Um, don't have to necessarily create your own mission. Go support someone's that help them spread their message. Use these rare and valuable skills to help another one support their mission, and maybe that becomes an income opportunity. That could be a sales role, or an affiliate role. There's lots of different ways to tie in with these kind of types of careers or industries, or however. All these words are going to be changing now as well. But
I would add, joining a board of directors or a board of
yeah,
advisors,
if somebody
sense of
invites you,
purpose, right? What's that?
instead of somebody
Yeah, nobody.
invites you in.
That's so true.
All
So
right,
true.
so we'll wrap it up here. So just wanted to again think about the big picture stuff that gets forgotten about when we're traditionally doing retirement planning. When it's just what percentage of your income are you saving today for 30 or 40 years from now? And while yes, probably need to be doing some of that, it's easy to kind of forget or not be excited about it. I want to talk about the things that, and a lot of that we can't control because you can save for 40 years and the stock market crashes and then what, right? So I wanted to hit on things like, hey, what are we thinking? What are we doing about our health today to make sure that doesn't derail us in the future? How are we diversifying our income and ways of accumulating income, timing, tax diversification, not just stocks and bond diversification. Um, and then always not just to build your network for you, but it becomes a time where you're probably going to want to give back. And who's that person out there that needs to hear from you specifically for whatever reason? You'd be able to change their life in a positive way. But if you're not available or connected to do that, um, then we never know what couldn't happen. But what could happen, and so I think I see so many veterans having meaningful retirements. They're set. They're essentially have all the income they need. They did all the right things, and then they use their free time to go give back. And I think don't necessarily look wealthy. Don't have the big houses and stuff, but they're wealthy in their hearts. And that's what I've learned from 15 years in this industry. The money isn't sexy to me anymore. It's all always comes down to things like emotions and purpose. Um, and yeah, so I'll leave it at
I
that.
agree.
No, appreciate everybody hanging with us, and hope we found some of
Thank
that
you, Scott. I know we
insightful.
went a little over and that's on me, but
No, all good. No, this
please,
is fun.
before anybody leaves, and I know that we'll be sharing this in our ongoing cohorts. We have several cohorts that are live right now. They're getting ready to graduate, but this will be shared with them. Connect with Scott right there on LinkedIn, Scott R. Tucker. Also, there it is. I popped your website in the chat, but please click on that survey. That is very helpful to us. We want to hear from you, right? I mean, is this, relevant? Is there something else you'd like us also to include? So that's critically important. Please click on that Airtable link. It's very short, I promise. I hate surveys, but it's important.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We're gonna have to have you back to do the LinkedIn and building a network. So because I
Yeah, I
think
had
that,
some interesting
excuse
posts
me.
recently where I was kind of surprised how people responded. And
Yeah, and how do
so
you handle
happy to,
those? Yeah.
huh?
And
Yeah,
how do you handle those? That kind of thing. What's that strategy? But
yeah,
well, we will be posting again. I hope everybody, follows us on social media, goes to our website, our events page. We will be hosting the third part in this series with Scott soon, and that date, which I do not know off the top of my head, as I rapidly approach the age of 65, um, short-term memory isn't what it used to be, but please, we are looking forward to the third part in our series with Scott. So thank you very much. And any last words?
No, I'm good. I mean, I could hang out. I thought I had it on my schedule. We were here till 2:30, so I can hang out if
Wow.
anybody wants to chat or have
Oh,
questions.
you're East Coast. You're East Coast. Any
Oh yeah,
questions? Anybody want to? I was sort of
Latoya.
I was fielding text messages that I was getting, so I kind of some of those were what I jumped in on. But
All good.
is everybody ready for? Oh, Latoya, yeah, please.
Yes, Scott, where do we start with all of this? So I am more from a traditional background, traditional understanding of all of these concepts and tips and insights. So where would you suggest someone like myself start to even begin investing in the right things? Where, what's your suggestion?
I mean, the what do you are you employed with an employer right now or
No, self-employed
self-employed?
and
Okay.
yeah, VA pension and just, growing up with the traditional savings mindset and
Yeah, then stick with traditional. The low hanging fruit, the one nobody's going to say you're doing it wrong is the Roth IRA. That's that. If you're thinking, is this just retirement dollars? Finding and um, you can always go to an online broker and do it on the cheap and just get the lowest cost thing out there. Um, I I would argue, like, why not go work with a young new financial advisor, someone who's trying to start their own business. They're not going to make a whole bunch of money from opening a Roth IRA account for you, but they need somebody to talk to and go develop a relationship and be like, hey, I want to, I know you're learning this. You just got licensed, so you're 10 steps ahead of me, but, bring me along, teach me the basics of this. Obviously, one of the big names that you can't go wrong is reading Dave Ramsey's book, or a
Mhm.
similar type of book along those, the basics of investing. But, if you want to have a traditional retirement account, starting with that because that's something everybody's going to understand, and that way, because the problem with this industry, everybody's got opinions and they're
right,
going to say this and that and you did it wrong or don't do that and don't do this, and so you just eventually develop your own strategy and stuff, and understanding that it's all risky, going forward from this point on, one way or the other. You we never once you invest the dollar in something else, then technically it might not be there anymore. So as long as we understand that, eventually you're going to have to find the type of investment you feel most comfortable in. But essentially, the way our whole system is set up, once you've taken advantage of your military benefits, beyond that, you've got to you have to get your money to work for you. We can invest our time, our talents, or our treasure,
right.
right, to
Yeah.
create new income. So
I know, Scott, you're not going to promote yourself. But I recommend that you go to his website. He has a, US Vet Wealth War Chest strategy.
I
He's
do
written some
my stuff's all in
amazing books.
yeah, my
Go
stuff's
ahead.
all insurance focused, so not specifically what you're asking for, Latoya, but no, thank you, Stephanie, I appreciate it. But I would say for investing type advice, go find your online guru you want to follow, that does that kind of stuff, or, get their book. But, maybe also find somebody locally that you can sit down with and educate, on the various paths out there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, find a group. Could be a LinkedIn group, could be somewhere else, that, of fellow military spouses and veterans that are, you know, interested or experienced or knowledgeable in this area. You know, I mean, they're out there. I fortunately, you know, found that kind of support network, and it especially when it's you just don't have even the basic skill sets. You don't even know the terminology, right? What's the difference between, you know, a stock and a bond, for example? I mean, it's those are really great places to go because you will learn, I think, a lot more than you'll learn just um on a website. You know,
Okay,
and
thank you.
I have no doubt that Robinhood has all kinds of great
Oh yeah.
resources, even read-throughs, things to consider.
I mean, Robinhood
So
might be good, you know, as a broker. Again, this is not a solicitation, or whatever.
yeah,
But again, there's online brokers. You know, you can do stuff on your iPhone now. Some of that
yeah,
stuff can be dangerous because you can move too quickly. So I just always think at some point, you know, if we're starting out, really just want to learn the basics, then you know, getting with someone who's new in the industry, this gives them an opportunity to help somebody genuinely, because it's, you know, it's really hard in this industry to find clients to make money, and so, um, you know, but you want to genuinely, you know, learn along with them, and not, and unfortunately, I think you're coming at it from the right perspective. A lot of people are asking questions, you know, trying to poke holes and stuff. It's like, no, 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 we're all just trying to learn how all this chaos works, and,
yeah,
you know, being realistic that, um, every professional in this industry, or every type of investment, the way it's marketed and sold, they're all going to push their story, right? And
yeah,
so you need to flip the script on all the information coming. Even Dave Ramsey, great information, but he's got one method, right? Eventually, you're going to have to figure out which one's your method. Who knows? Maybe I know people out there, they're just real estate people. They don't do any investing because they're just like, you know what? I don't want to let that be in somebody else's control. This I understand. So the best way to save and
yeah, and
invest is find what you
yeah,
understand.
and
Yes,
educating
thank you.
on crypto. I mean, I have my youngest who is
Yeah.
a lot smarter than me on my oldest, a lot smarter than me on this, and you know, he's like crypto this, and you know, and so I
So
think it, as Scott said earlier, it's really about being diversified. You're not going to put everything in your mattress. You're going
yeah,
to, or everything in one thing. But yeah,
diversification and
I
knowledge.
highly recommend, and maybe Scott, you can even, if you know of any groups, um, you know, that folks can tune into rather, or join, that are veterans and military spouses or anything, or we
Well,
can look
Lacey,
ourselves a toy and share it out.
yeah, the
Okay,
Lacey
thank you.
Langford's podcast is probably a good place to
Mm,
start. The military money.
yeah,
She's even got a conference. You know, they've got, you know, there are a lot of military financial bloggers, you know, out there, you know, doing personal finance 101. And so, I haven't kept up with, I don't know if somebody's written a book or something recently, but, you know, a lot of podcasts. It's the easiest way, you know, I've gone to learn stuff in the last years is, you take advantage of the online communities and then find the ones you resonate with and lean in. And, but sometimes, again, people get pretty focused on, we got to all be doing it this way. If anybody doesn't do it our way, then they're crazy. It's like, well, you know,
yeah.
maybe not.
Well, thank you both for the advice. Very helpful.
Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.